Now here's what they came down through the valley down through here. They came down through this way from the northeast,
okay.
right down through this way.
Was it Billy Mitchell who told them years before that if they were attacked, that's how they would come down? Was it Billy? Someone.
It could have been that.
Yeah.
That would have been the logical one because he had the radar that they did have was up on top of these mountain ranges.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't pick them up. See,
right.
They just swept in over the cane fields and the sugar beet cane fields.
Okay, today is December 4th, 1987.
Right.
This is Joe Todd, an interview with Mr. Alvin H. Christensen in Norman, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
Lake Benton, Minnesota.
And which birthday?
2/3/20.
February 3rd?
February 3rd, 1920. 2:30 p.m.
And who is your father?
Hans P.
I'm sorry?
Hans, H-A-N-S.
H-A-N-S.
P.
Okay. And your mother?
Christine.
And what was her maiden name?
Christensen.
Is that her maiden name?
No relation.
Spelled the same way?
Same way. All people from Denmark spell it. The true Danish people spell it E-N-S-E-N.
When did your family come from Denmark originally?
Mother was born here. My dad came over 1901, 1902.
How old was he when he came over?
He said he was 21.
Did he say why he came to this country?
I think he wanted to leave Denmark, as I remember. See, he'd been gone now for 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what kind of work did your father do?
He's a farmer.
Farmer.
They had I understand they had a rather large family, and he wanted to get out on his own rather than assume a small tract of land there in southern Denmark. And so he just saved his money and came over here.
What part of Denmark is he from?
There's a little town named Trista. Trista, as far as I can determine.
As a small boy, what chores did you do on the farm in Minnesota?
Well, basically we had a dairy farm. And milk cows and take care of the horses and so forth before the days of the tractor.
And how large was the farm?
160 acres.
160. And how long did you live in Minnesota?
I lived there 19 years.
19 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And where'd you live? What was the name of the town?
Lake Benton.
Lake Benton.
It's a small farming community down there in southwestern part of the state.
So you go through high school there?
Yep.
You graduated what year?
1938.
1938.
Yeah.
Okay. After high school, what'd you do?
Joined the CC camp, the triple C's, till it was in the spring of 1939 that I joined the C's.
How was that program organized, the CCC camps?
Oh, it was set up for a lot of the young men to find some employment, and by the same token, what little they did earn, they could send it back home and help support their families.
What was your salary?
Oh, I think it was the $30 a month or $21 a month, something like that.
How much was sent home?
Oh, whatever allotment size you made.
Yep. And where'd you join the camp?
At Red Wing, Minnesota.
Red Wing, Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And what'd you do there?
Oh, I was clerical work, part-time cook, and I think the rest of the time we planted trees. We planted trees till they came out your ears.
What kind of trees did you plant?
Oh, there was all kinds. Really, more of the northern hardwoods.
Yeah. And Red Wing is in what part of Minnesota?
It's way over in the eastern, over there along the Minnesota River. Mississippi River.
How far from Minneapolis in that area?
Oh, it's probably 75 to 100 miles southeast of Minneapolis,
Okay.
St. Paul.
Who was in charge of that camp?
Oh, really the Army was.
Okay. Remember the guy's name?
No, faintest idea.
What rank was he?
Oh, he probably couldn't have been much more than a captain.
Yeah.
Or second lieutenant,
Okay.
a third, or just a lieutenant.
Now, was the CCC, was it a paramilitary organization?
In the sense it was, in that there was regimentation in it. Yeah.
What was your average day at the camp?
Oh,
Like what time did you get up?
oh, it seems to me we used to get up, if I remember, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And but it was considered really basically an 8-hour day, unless there was something special to do.
What was the local town there at Red Wing?
Red Wing was the town.
I mean, Red Wing was the town.
Yeah, we were, as I remember, 6, 7 miles from there.
What was the attitude of the local people toward the boys in the camp?
Just like any other young man.
And how long were you in there?
Oh, I was there till September of '39.
Then what you did?
When Hitler ran into Poland on September 3rd, 1939, is when I went up and volunteered for enlistment in the Navy.
And you enlisted where?
In Minneapolis.
Minneapolis.
But they actually didn't call me up and get sworn in until November.
Where'd you take boot camp?
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about boot camp.
Oh. Up there at Great Lakes, it was cold as could be. Very cold. And I happened to be there, of course, in the months of December and January. And it was a 12-week program of drilling, just drilling and standing miscellaneous watches.
And you were trained as what?
Oh, just your basic principles of Navy life. We slept in hammocks, and swab decks, and stood watches from about every 4 hours. One of us in a company of 100 was on watch. Had to wash our own clothes. We had our sea bags. We slept in our hammocks, and our sea bags, of course, had to be all laid out at the end. Our clothes all had to be washed, and we had our little tie strings that had to be knotted in a certain, the old square knot that the Navy taught us. And they had to be in a perfect row, and they had to be clean, and everything that was issued you had to be laid out there except what you had actually on that you was wearing. And if it wasn't, why, they would tear it up. Sometimes they would just have the company march over it if it was a case of a guy that persistently had a very poor sea bag. And he'd have to go wash it all in and get it all dry. And we'd press them, we'd put them under our mattresses and in our hammocks, and we'd get our creases in it.
And did you have a barracks you lived in?
Oh yes, yeah. There seems to me 52 a barracks, if I remember right. And we went through all our drills, and we took our examination of where we'd like to go or what we'd like to do. And they had quotas for go to radio school or fireman school or engineering or whatever. And I put down radio that I wanted, and they only had 1 or 2 others that wanted radio, so I was on the losing end. So they needed people in the medical department, so I was sent off to San Diego in January 21, 1940. It's 21 blows, and it was the 21st of January, and I remember it. And then we headed for San Diego.
How'd you travel?
By train.
By train?
Yeah. And we was through hospital corps school where they taught us all courses in medicine, anatomy, physiology, materia medica, pharmacy, everything in the line of medicine. And in May of 1940, the latter part, no, it was in April. It was the first part of April that we, again, we had our choices of where you wanted to go, unless it was already filled for whatever school you was going to go to. So they had a couple stations only open in the U.S. The rest of them either stayed in San Diego or you could go to Hawaii or Florida. There were 3 places. So I thought, well, Hawaii sounded awful nice. So I went out there, and we landed out there in May of 1940.
May of 1940. So you were a corpsman.
Yeah. Hospital corpsman.
You go by ship to Hawaii?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you think that we would go to war with Germany and Japan at that time?
I figured back in my mind eventually we would, yes. Yeah.
What was the attitude, just in general, of the people that you were with in the Navy about Germany, the rise of Hitler?
Oh, I think we all knew it was coming. They all, the fellows all felt, they didn't say so, but there was a battle where that German battleship was sunk in 1941.
At the Bismarck?
Yeah, it was one of those that was sunk, and old Walter Winchell made his toast, as he did in his program, radio program, that bottoms up to the German Navy. See, and that was to the Bismarck. See, I remember that real clearly.
Were you more concerned about the rise of Hitler or the Japanese in Manchuria? Because the Japanese invaded in '36.
Yeah.
China.
But
was that a fair question?
I don't think we did. We never really did. I don't think we ever did. We stayed there, and we had all of our training, and after really just a year aboard ship, or at the hospital, because in May of 1941 is when I transferred to aboard the Tennessee, U.S.S. Tennessee.
Were you involved in any way in that Lend-Lease program we had with England?
No.
How did that program work, or do you know?
I really wasn't familiar with it, other than that they sent their supply ships way up there in what is it, Murmansk, way up there in northern Russia, to avoid the German submarines.
Okay.
That was mostly the Merchant Marine and some of the Coast Guard escorting it for a while. Then the Navy got their destroyers in there to escort them.
And where did you go aboard the Tennessee?
May 1st, 1941.
41. And where?
In Pearl Harbor.
In Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Okay. How big's the Tennessee?
In big, what did you mean?
I mean, like, how long is the ship?
Can I look? I forget. It's the same class as the California.
Now, when you say class, what do you mean by class?
The battleship, the constructions of those battleships, they're according to various classes, and the Tennessee and the California were the 2 last ones in 1921 to be commissioned, with certain designs until they came along with the Missouri here during World War II. And that's when they made a considerable difference in it.
Now, what would be the differences between the Missouri class and the...
Well, Missouri, of course, was a far more modern ship than ours was. And there's classes of all of our battleships. There's like the Colorado class. See, that would include the Colorado, the Maryland, the Washington, which was canceled, and the West Virginia. They was all of a certain class, a certain design, and so forth. And you can go back even a little farther. And we have the Tennessee class, which is the Tennessee and the California. They were identical sister ships, and they were, well, they don't give it in here. Just the size or the length of the ship. But,
how many men on the Tennessee?
prior to the war, we had probably 1,400 people. And after the war had started, our complement had been increased to around 3,200, 32 to 33.
What is the difference between the peacetime complement and the wartime complement?
In the wartime complement, you got to have far more men to man the guns. You got more guns being manned 24 hours a day than you did pre-war days.
What size guns did you have?
We had 16-inch, 14-inch rifles. That's the big turrets. And we had a set of 4, 3 in each turret. And of course, at Pearl Harbor, we had from the old days the 8-inch batteries off the side that fired off that, which became obsolete in one day. Because the Tennessee had many target practices, which the Navy did. You would have a towed vessel way out there where you could barely see it. And then, even then, we didn't have our radar to spot it. We had range finders, which tells you the distance, but it wouldn't pick it out like radar today. And our gunners would sometimes cut the rope on them that was towing that, or we'd hit it and smash it. See. Finally, the old admiral sent a message. I'll tell that Tennessee to quit firing. They're ruining our tow, our tow target. So,
were you on board the Tennessee when it went strip ship?
when it was what?
When it went strip ship, all unnecessary material taken off?
Oh yeah, that was in Bremerton, 1942. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we all moved ashore. All the personnel moved ashore. They're in Bremerton.
Okay, before we get to that, did you think that there'd be an attack on Pearl Harbor? Was it?
Not really. No, I don't think any of us really thought that there was ever would. Although an incident did occur about a week or so ahead of time. We read in the Honolulu Advertiser that the Japanese fleet was moving down the China coast toward the Philippines, thinking they were headed for the Saipan and so forth in there. And that's where our intelligence lost them after they got out there. And once they get to sea, why, at that time we had no means of keeping track of them. And that's when they turned and headed east towards the Hawaii. But it was published, and we remarked, well, wouldn't that be something if they came over here and bombed us? I mean, it was just a chance remark.
Now, when was this?
This was in probably November of '41.
And where was your place in the ship? Where did you stay?
I had a topside battle station. Each man was assigned a certain spot on the ship during battle.
That was it. What part of the ship were you located?
I had the whole topside.
The whole topside.
Whole topside for repair. Yeah.
Okay. Of course. Now, your duty during battle, I guess, would still be a corpsman.
Oh yes. Oh, most assuredly.
Okay. Now, below deck,
Mm-hmm.
where did you stay? Where did you stay in the ship?
Well, we had our own. Each department had their own area for their quarters, and where we had our little sick bay with our beds and so forth.
And which deck was that located?
That was down right above the double bottoms, as you call, right under number 2 turret.
Number 2 turret. Oh, so you're right. Okay, right under there.
Forward, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what were you doing Saturday, December 6th?
Three of us went over to the submarine over at Pearl City, and well, I think we each had 2 beers. Just we didn't like the movie that was on, so and everybody else went ashore, and so we just went over there and came back, and that was it.
And you arrived back at the ship at what time?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I don't remember. It wasn't very late.
Okay. Sunday morning.
We was there Sunday. We woke Sunday morning, had our breakfast and so forth, and I think we just finished eating. That was the days when we had mess cooks that would bring set up the tables and so forth in each compartment where each division is.
And where's your? Yeah, you were in your compartment.
In our compartment, yeah. We had our breakfast there, yeah. Hmm. And after we'd finished breakfast, we was in our I call our hospital area where our beds were, because we had beds all the way across. I forget even how many we'd had. There was probably room for 20 beds at the most, bunks, double bunks. And we were just kind of looking out. One of the boys was kind of looking out the porthole, and he says, "My God, look at Hickam Field. They got a fire over there." And somebody, just perchance, was looking at the starboard side, and he says, "There's Ford Island. There's a fire over here too." And about that time is when General Quarters sounded. And we couldn't.
What is General Quarters?
General Quarters means everybody mans his battle station, wherever his station is designated. See, that's all pre-designated into your areas that you go, that you have to take care of. Each man has a place to go.
At that point, did you know what was happening? At that point.
No, not really. Not really. Not till I got to the top side. See, I told you I had a topside battle station. And I kind of like to patrol my area, and I walked over the top side, and if we had been hit on the top side with a bomb, other corpsmen from other stations close to me, they would have come up and given me assistance. We had boys stationed with telephones throughout the whole ship, see, that you could telephone back and forth to one another. So, but I never did. We were very fortunate aboard the Tennessee. We only had 4 men that were killed. The first one was a boy that I found lying up on the number 2 turret. It's right up on top of this one.
Okay, right there.
He was laying right up on top of there. All he had on is shorts, because in those days our uniform was white shorts and T-shirt. That was our uniform, sadly. But I found him with a bullet hole through his heart. That's the only wound that boy had, and that was evidently from a strafe, because they were strafing us. And the West Virginia was right beside us. A bomb had hit one of our barrels on our rifles, and that had ricocheted over onto the West Virginia, hit the bridge, killing their captain and several of the other people up on their bridge. See? Just how fortunate we were aboard our ship. Now that could have very easily gone down and gone through. See, that went right down into sick bay. So that's why I say we were very fortunate there. And then they were starting strafing again. And I thought, well, I better get down here back aft a ways.
Let me. Okay.
I'm going to get back aft a ways.
Now, where is your position on the ship again?
My top battle station.
Yeah.
Battle station was all through the top of the ship.
Okay.
Or the main decks up there.
Mm-hmm. And you found the boy up here that was killed?
Killed right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I eased back here. It was getting a little too hot up here. I went back here, and just as I got back up here is when the Arizona went up.
Okay, tell me what happened when the Arizona went up.
Well, I didn't stay around too long on the top side.
Did you see it go up?
Yes, merely because I recall the big ball of fire that came out of it.
Because now the Arizona is right behind the Tennessee. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. It wasn't over 50, 75 feet back there.
Now, when I interviewed Mr. Copeland, he was in the water going from the Arizona to the Maryland, and he said it lifted him out of the water.
I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah.
And
I wouldn't doubt it. It was a tremendous explosion.
describe that explosion. What do you recall about it?
Well, I didn't really at that time realize where that bomb had hit them. I didn't realize it was going down the stack because I wasn't back there to see it. During all the excitement of the firing, and our boys was firing aircraft fires and their 5-inch guns and everything, so we didn't really. I didn't really realize what that was, and. But I did notice that our old chief boatswain had a great number of hoses out around our fantail. The oil from the Arizona was coming up, and it hit it was going to catch fire to our fantail, see, the rear of our ship.
Now, is the ship steel?
Yep.
Now, how would it set the ship on fire?
Paint, repeated coats of paint, 20 years of paint, coats of paint. That's how hot it got. And it did start some fire, because back here is your officers' quarters, is below decks.
Would you hold this up and show me?
This is officers' quarters back here.
Okay.
This picture shows the whiteness of the ship, shows where the fire had occurred from that oil that had burned us, and it just burned all the paint right off the ship. Now, after I saw that blow up, I headed down below decks, back down to sick bay, because there was really nothing for me going on up in the top side, because everything else had occurred. West Virginia had already settled down in the water, and few casualties that they had to give assistance to came over, and they were taken care of by other boys that had manned the sick bay. So I went down below, and about that time, because events occurred so fast that to recall them, in the perfect sequence might be mistaken. But after I had got down below, this number 3 turret. This number 3 turret took a 14-inch piece of, or the nose of a 14-inch shell. Came hurtling down, went through the 14 inches of steel, down through 3 decks. And of course, the boys that was manning this particular turret, the powder loaders and so forth, the gunners mates. Well, let's just say out of that we got really 2 men were killed really outright when that shell came through. One other boy was badly mangled. And about 30 or 40 of them were burned. 30 to 40 boys had severe burns. Just wearing your shorts and your T-shirts. So all we had to bandage was the arms and legs. But we brought him up here, and Dr. Dorgan and I, in sick bay. Really, because I had worked in the operating room, assisting the doctors there in the Naval Hospital there in Pearl Harbor. I helped him and assisted him, and we tried our very, very best to keep that boy alive, doing what surgery we could with a very, very mangled body. The whole left side of his body was pretty well mashed, because he was almost, I understand, underneath it as that shell came through. See, now there was no explosion or anything. If there had been a charge on that, why, we'd gone like the Arizona had, see, because that was right down there, got down there close to the magazines where we stored all that big gunpowder. So we were fortunate there. So we finally got these boys all bandaged up using our old tannic acid solution, which all we could do was use our big 3-inch bandages and make maybe 5 gallons of tannic acid solution. By the same token, when this started, Pearl Harbor started, none of our doctors were aboard. Just the corpsmen were the only ones that were there, and we needed our morphine. We kept only a small. The corpsman that had charge of the pharmacy kept only a small amount of morphine as a painkiller in sick bay. So we had to go aft and get into the doctor's cabin. Our senior medical officer was a full captain. So we went back to his cabin, another boy and I said, well, we'll just go back and open that safe and get them. We got back there, the thing was on fire. So we got one of the old boys with the damage control parties that had access to a big axe. And he also had a crowbar. And we pried that thing off. As hot as it was, it didn't take much to get it off that bulkhead. And so we gingerly carried it up to sick bay, and then we broke it open and got what morphine we needed. And of course, we kept records of it, of what we'd used. So that was no problem.
What kind of shell was it that went through it didn't explode? Do you know?
That was just a piece of 14-inch shell, the nose of a shell. Just about.
So it wasn't a complete shell then?
No. Just a piece of metal is what it was. Just a piece of metal. But falling at that distance, why, it generated so much heat. Just due to the resistance that it did go through that 14 inches of metal down into the third deck. Went down three decks. So we worked, and word would fly that Japs were going to land troops on Oahu, that island where Pearl Harbor is located. Also that they had attacked the west coast of California, and all such rumors, that would fly. I do remember 2 other things before I left to come down. One is that there's one of the 5-inch gun mounts. The boys had fired so many shells that it had just melted the barrel. I mean, melted that barrel. It just bent. You couldn't get a shell through it. Just come down, see. It was like that. Another one, one of the Jap flyers, his plane was hit, and somehow or other he got out of that plane and was able to run a short distance over there on Ford Island. He was able to get out because he was coming over our plane, and I think he just strafed us, but then I think one of the gunners got him, and he landed and got out, jumped out of his plane, and started running. How he got out, I don't know. But by that time of the day, that Ford Island, which is a naval air station, had completely surrounded it with Marines. Marines were had stationed all around the whole island. See? And here he came with his plane, and they were waiting for him. Of course, the boys were so incensed that they didn't stop to try to capture him or anything. They just used their bayonets, and he didn't last long.
Let me that and show me basically how the attack went, what you remember of it.
From this one or that one?
Well, this one, and then we'll go to this one.
Okay. Yeah, this is the map of the island of Oahu. The top is to the north. This is northeast, northwest. This is northeast. This is the entrance into the Pearl Harbor. This is Pearl Harbor. This is Ford Island, the Naval Air Station. And as you enter, the ships enter the harbor, they'll go all the way around, coming by the submarine base is right over in here. We come along in here. This is where the Arizona is resting today. That's the Arizona Memorial. And the Tennessee was immediately forward right here at this position, right?
Where did the Japanese come from?
The Japanese came down the this Waihiwa Valley, right? Came right down through this way, which is a valley, noticing two mountain ranges. And their radar, most of our radar at that time was over on up on this point up here. And this is where the news story goes that the one boy had some unidentified planes, and nobody would pay any attention to him because they were expecting a flight out of San Diego to come in on Sunday. They figured all that's the planes that were coming in. And this is an old Kaneohe Naval Air Station, which was hardly molested. It was just aircraft over there. We did not have any aircraft in Pearl Harbor on Pearl Harbor Day. We did have the old, I believe it was the old U.S. Utah, which had been converted to make it look like an aircraft carrier, in that it had just a wooden deck with very little superstructure on it. This is the Utah over here. Now that was one of the very first ships that were sunk, as I understand it, merely because that was supposed to be an aircraft. That's where one of our aircraft that had pulled out on Saturday was anchored. Then we come around over here, and this is where we have our Battleship row. This is the Arizona, sitting right here. This was the Nevada that got underway. This is the old Vestal, which is a repair ship that pulled out, but was strafed, but was not bombed. Then we come to the Tennessee. This is the Tennessee. This is the West Virginia. This is the Maryland. This is the Oklahoma. And this is the California up here. The Avocet was hit up here, and all of these ships over here had bomb damage, but not torpedo damage, merely because they couldn't get the torpedoes in there. And this is your submarines. They bombed it, but no torpedoes.
Where did that Japanese airplane land and the guy got out and ran? Do you know?
He came over our fantail and landed right over in this area. He missed this old building over here, and he landed right over in here. And this is where the Marines were stationed all through here. Now the two-man submarines that were in the bay at the time came in, and they tried to get us because the Tennessee, because we had not suffered any torpedo damage. They tried to come in this way, but they couldn't reach us because of the West Virginia that was sitting there, and they tried this way, but they didn't want to get close to the old Arizona because it was on fire and all that, and those two-man subs didn't, they had to surface to fire. So fortunately, we took no torpedo damage. All we had was that one bomb or piece of metal that fell down through our number 3 turret. Now this goes all the way out, then it goes out to the channel again.
Okay.
Now back here again shows you where the old naval hospital. The old naval hospital used to be located right here. Today this has all been changed and converted, and this is where you have your Honolulu International Airport over in here. Taking you over to downtown Honolulu and Waikiki and Diamond Head and the rest of them.
Okay, so the Japanese came down from the north.
They came down from the northwest, down this way. Right, this swept right down through.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How long did the attack last?
All I have to go by is what I was told, and that it probably lasted 15, 20 minutes. Maybe lasted longer than that, but it seems to me that it went on about 2 hours, but I'm not sure.
What do you remember? Any thoughts you had during that time, during the attack?
No, other than to take care of the boys that were hurt. That was really all that we was thinking. We were just busy doing our jobs, just like so many others were.
Were you afraid the Japanese were going to invade?
Never gave it serious thought, really. Never gave it serious thought. They could have. They could have taken the island, I'm sure, if they'd landed, if they'd had troops. Because we were just mass confusion.
After the attack, what'd you do?
Well, we continued taking care of our boys in sick bay.
And how many wounded did you have?
Well, as I said, we had about 30 or 40 boys that were burned. Was our only casualties. The boys that had died or got killed, all 4 of them, we just transferred them over to the Naval Hospital, the bodies for burial, and then we had to, of course, get it cleaned up as much as we could. Every effort was made to get us out of Pearl Harbor.
How did they do that? Of course, you had ships behind you and the side of you that were.
These little items that you see here is what we were tied up to. They are called quays, and they are big, huge concrete structures with filled with sand, and the concrete walls on it are I would estimate to be at least 15 inches thick, so that we could tie up. Now, when the West Virginia went down, she of course came this way, up against us, merely because of the force of the 8 torpedoes that she took, and that in turn pushed us tightly up against these quays, and we couldn't get out. We couldn't go forward, couldn't go aft, and of course the Oklahoma was sunk, and we could have maneuvered around the Maryland. That wouldn't. And that's eventually the way they blew up this quay, and this quay was the charges, and then the tug towed us out of there, out into the stream, and took us over here to the docks.
Okay, so was the Maryland gone at that time?
Yes, yeah, and of course the Oklahoma was still there. She was capsized, and she was there quite a while. And then we come over here, and we got loaded up with additional ammunition, because we were running very low with anti-aircraft, and we took on some food, and we got out of there right around the 20th of December. Is when we left Pearl Harbor. We sailed out of Pearl Harbor.
And where'd you go?
We got out. We came out of this here down the channel, headed out this way, like we were headed for the Philippines. Philippines was in the midst of their battles. We sailed for 2 days. We sailed westward, and then we turned and went back northeastward. But then we headed for Bremerton. Now on Christmas Day, we still had a Christmas dinner. And after dinner, another corpsman and I were standing on the port side, just watching it was a clear, sunshiny day, but it was just a choppy sea. And here we saw 2 streaks coming through the water. And we knew immediately what they were. And of course the ship had spotted them too from our tower. The lookouts had spotted us. And the captain immediately made a turn. I forget whether he went right or left, but anyhow they went by us. Otherwise, I'd been out in the middle of that continental ocean. And they never found us. But we sailed on into Bremerton, and we got into Bremerton on January 30th. We came in the Straits of Juan de Fuca, which is this, from the Pacific Ocean into Bremerton, in Seattle area. As we came in, our destroyer escorts dropped some ash cans or bombs, and it virtually rolled me out of my bed. They were that close, and they had some very suspicious underwater craft that they never could get identified. So and we never could find out if anything was there or not. But they didn't gamble. They didn't take any chances. They just let them go. But it was quite a blast. But then it was very, very, very nice to get back into Bremerton, Seattle. Very nice.
Before we go on, whenever you hear Pearl Harbor or the U.S.S. Tennessee, what do you think of first thing? Well, let me say, Pearl Harbor is what?
A lot of happy memories and one day of very bad memories.
Does the good outweigh the bad?
Oh, far bad. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I had a very enjoyable time over in Hawaii. It was completely undeveloped back in 1941. The only two hotels we had was the Royal Hawaiian and Ala Moana, and they were all, of course, restricted to officers. So we had to find our own entertainment.
What did you do for entertainment?
During the period of time I was in the Naval Hospital out there, during that tour of duty, our favorite thing was to get one of the old Kanaki boys that worked over in our laundry. He had a station wagon, and for $2 he'd take us all the way around the island, going all way. And we'd made several trips that way, and he would furnish the food. We'd stop someplace and spend the night, and of course over there you don't need any blankets or anything, but we'd take a blanket to sleep on. We'd sleep on the beach. And other times we'd go around over there, and we would spend a whole weekend. We'd go down to the brewery and get a keg of beer, and we'd go to the kitchen, and we would get enough food to last us, that wouldn't spoil. And we'd spend all Friday night and Saturday night, and then Sunday morning he'd come back and get us, and then we'd finish another trip around the island. Also, when I was there, he made arrangements for me to go out with some of the native boys at that time. We'd go way up here on the north end of the island. This is where old Del Webb, long after the war, went up and built his big hotel resort up here. And this is also the place where you have your big surf riders coming in. This is where you have some of the biggest waves in the world coming in. But we would come up here and we'd go wild boar hunting. Well, that was just wild banana trees and palm trees and everything like that, and they would spear the wild boar. And after we get them back, and they'd clean them, and then we'd have a luau, a true luau.
What is a true luau?
A true luau is a roast pig. Now, of course, they clean them all and skin him, and not skin him, but take all the hair off and so forth, and then they'd roast him, put him over a spit fire, and he would go for several hours. And then they would serve all of the native foods, your papaya and your bananas and your taro roots and nuts and everything that grew on that island, including their poi. They'd have one finger or two finger poi. So you could use one finger or you could use two fingers. But you had no utensils.
What is poi?
Poi, that is well, it's almost like a cornstarch, but its true color is generally purplish in color. And I think it's made from a root. It's one of the roots that they'll boil, and it comes out into like a thick pudding. Oh, it doesn't have a whole lot of taste to it, but it's supposed to be very nutritious.
What was the attitude of the natives toward the mainlanders?
Oh, before when I was there, it was just ideal, really. I really enjoyed it until about October, late September, October of 1941. They moved in a great number of troops. They increased the Navy personnel, Marine personnel, and the Army personnel, until we really got overrun with servicemen. And that's when, of course, the attitude would change. Because
What about the Japanese on Hawaii? The American Japanese that lived there
oh, they were just as good as any other Americans.
after the attack.
After the attack, they so many of them, of course, claimed that they had nothing to do with it, and I'm sure they did not. But there were a few that were sent in there with spies. They claimed that there was one sitting under one of the piers in a little small boat, the radio directing them into the harbor through radio detection, and that somebody saw him do it, and he put his rifle to his shoulder, and that stopped that in a hurry. And another incident you hear. Of course, you hear all kinds of things of the violence that'll occur, and high emotions and so forth. That they dropped a bomb right down at the entrance to the YMCA building, which a lot of the servicemen it went down to. But there was a big bomb hole right out in front, and one of the, I don't know if he's an officer or enlisted man, but anyhow, he had a pistol on him. And he asked the Japanese taxi driver to take him out to Pearl Harbor, and the guy refused to do it. He said, "I'm going to ask you one more time. Take me out to Pearl Harbor." He wouldn't do it. He took his gun out and shot him. Pulled him out and then took his taxi and went back to Pearl Harbor. That's the kind of stories and so forth that you'll hear.
Okay, you left Pearl Harbor to Bremerton. How long did it take to repair the damage in the Tennessee?
I think we was maybe up there 30 days or so.
Mm-hmm.
They did just long enough for them to tear out the 8-inch guns and replace them with the 5-inch and the 40 inches.
So they just more or less remodeled the ship then?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Until later on in 42, we had to go back in, and that's when they tore all the way down to the it's down at the point on the ship where you have your extra heavy for armament for torpedo resistance, and normally it's below. It would be below the water line.
How thick is that armor at that point?
Oh, I would probably say that's a good 12, 16 inches.
What kind of torpedoes the Japanese used? Do you know?
Oh, well, I think they threw everything in the world they had at us. All kinds of torpedoes.
Of course, I understand that, was it
Yamamoto
planned the attack, and
Yeah.
when he found out that the aircraft carriers weren't there,
Uh-huh.
he said he realized that Japan was in trouble.
Yeah.
Had you been at Bremerton before Pearl Harbor? Had you been there?
No, never had.
Okay. I was going to ask how the people geared up for war in the civilian population in Seattle. Is that a fair question? Could you notice the people, gearing up for war? Of course, all the factories went from making cars to tanks.
Yeah. Oh, wow. People always treated us very friendly.
Mm-hmm.
They were just
Did they treat you all any different being a Pearl Harbor survivor at that time?
Not really, because they were bringing so many new ones in that the ordinary citizen would know the difference.
Yeah.
It's just that some of the new recruits, in order to try to be an old salt, why they'd go down to the store and buy all kinds of medals and put on. But you could take one look at them and tell.
Mm-hmm. So after you left Bremerton, where'd you go?
Then we headed back for to Hawaii, and we
Did you
I
return?
was trying to remember it. We went out. I think it was either the Coral Sea or the Battle of Midway that occurred there in the middle of '42 or late '42. Anyhow, all the battleships that were available went out, and we were about 1,000 to 1,500 miles from the scene of the battle, but we were a secondary force in case in case the Japs came through. Then the battleships would move in, and we were going around in a 360-degree circle, and there must have been about 10 of the battleships at that time that were back in service. and that's we'd just circle that, circle that, and circle that.
Now, was it the Coral? Let me see. There was the Lexington and the Yorktown. Both were sunk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One at Midway and one at Coral Sea.
Coral Sea. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Yorktown.
Which one?
I think the Yorktown went down because they had a new one and they renamed it the Yorktown.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that was the Battle of Coral Sea.
I think it was too that came first.
Yeah, because that's where we stopped the Japanese approach to Australia.
Right.
And that's still a national holiday in Australia.
Right.
When I was in Vietnam, I spent that week in Australia. I was treated like a king.
Well, yeah.
They still like Americans.
Oh yeah, I know.
What were did you know how the battle was going, Coral Sea?
I had no idea. They didn't put out anything.
Okay, did you know what was going on?
Not really. Not really. I'm sure some of our officers did. You know, we had an admiral aboard, and I'm sure the captain was aware of what was going on. But they didn't divulge any of it. I don't know why they didn't. No, there's no way we could transmit anything to the enemy. But no, it wasn't until after as I remember, we got back into Pearl Harbor. Did we know anything about that?
Did you go back to Battleship Road?
I'm trying to
Were you tied up at Pearl Harbor?
I think we went up the docks. But I think some of them tied up to this quays, yeah, that were still good, you know.
Of course, I guess were the three ships still there, the Arizona, West Virginia, and Oklahoma, were they still there?
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I know the Oklahoma and Arizona was.
Yeah.
Did they refit the West Virginia?
Yeah, they raised her, yeah. They pumped the water out, and then...
I was going to ask, how do you raise a battleship?
Well, they basically they pumped the water out of a watertight compartment. Now, watertight compartment, if you're familiar with the Navy, you know, we have our hatches that you clamp down, and it is watertight. They'll take them compartment by compartment at a time, or depending on how many pumps, they would empty that compartment. Then all the water would be gone out of it, see. Then I'm sure they went back to the fantail and did the same thing to some of those in the after part of the ship. And eventually they get all those compartments, watertight hatches all closed and all the water out of them. And then it would come up by itself. Some of them they'd have to go down and seal patches on, just weld patches, you know, underwater welding, and put those patches on so it wouldn't fill up. Because there's some holes inside of that thing. There are some holes in it.
How many torpedoes did the West Virginia take?
I understand it was 8.
Why didn't it capsize like the Oklahoma?
It didn't have time. They didn't have watertight compartments set. They didn't have general quarters sounded. See, as soon as general quarters sounded, you've got just a matter of seconds to get out of there and get to your stations. Now we would have timing tests on the Tennessee with 3,300 men, and up and down those certain ladders, you had a certain way to go to get there, and everybody, that traffic goes one way on one ladder and another one on another ladder, and we could do it in less than a minute. All 3,300 men could be at their stations within a minute, because if they didn't, then they're going to be locked in their compartment, or whatever compartment he got caught in. And of course they'd telephone, well, so and so didn't make it through here, and they wonder why. No, we'd have to grab our little first aid bags and run. And fortunately, I didn't have too far to go to get to the top side, and then I could go wherever I wanted to.
What were your normal duties on the battleship during the war? You know, when you were not in actual combat, what were your duties?
Oh, we had to take care of all the sick. I worked in the dental office for several months, and I worked had charge of the pharmacy for several months. And I worked in the clerical office where we did, kept all our records and so forth. And I would assist in the pharmacy, or assist in the operating room. We had one operating room table, of course, and we'd have to periodically re-sterilize all of our instruments.
How'd you do that?
We had what we call an autoclave under steam pressure, and they'd be wrapped in cloth.
That brings up another point. How often did you have to take on fresh water, and where was it stored?
Oh, it's below decks. Because they could convert a lot of that seawater.
How's that done?
I never did go down the engine rooms to find out, but I'm sure through evaporation.
Yep.
I don't know how else you'd get the salt out. And they did bring fresh water too, though. When we get into port, they did add fresh water, and of course their diesel fuel.
How often did you have to go into port to take on food, rations?
Oh, I seemed like every time we went in. There, just immediately prior to Pearl Harbor, there was approximately 4 or 5 battleships in and 4 and 5 out. We'd take rotations. Come in on a Saturday and go out on a Monday. See? Just like on Pearl Harbor. See, they hit us on Sunday. Well, there's a group that was supposed to go out on Monday. See? And the West Virginia pulled up alongside of us on Saturday afternoon. It's the only thing that saved us. But she did. Yeah, I had the dental officer from over there. He said I had to get out of there. There's nothing for me to do over there. So he came over there and he asked me, he said, well, what can I do? Is there anything I can do? Because at that particular time I was working in the dental office. And I said, well, you can grab a broom and we can get this place cleaned up a little bit so we can be halfway respectable as a medical unit. And he said, well, fine, good, give me a broom. So he was willing to do that.
When was the first actual combat the Tennessee went into? Besides Pearl Harbor, of course.
Oh, golly, because we went through the whole gauntlet of everything that occurred over there.
Now, the Tennessee was hit pretty bad at one of the battles.
Oh, that was down over there in the Philippines.
What happened there?
Well, I wasn't aboard on it at that time, but that's where they had that last naval engagement of heavy or big ships that had a battle where they'd throw shells at each other. Golly, that must have been back in '45.
Which battle was the Yamamoto sunk? Is that Coral Sea or Midway?
It probably was in Midway.
Because that was the largest battleship in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And time we broke their code, we had a flight of the fighters planes were out patrolling and guarding, and they was on the go all the time. But the boy that shot down that plane was Yamamoto's in. He's passed away here just in the last 30 days. Yeah, he was 71. He had 17 planes that he had not been on.
Where did he live?
I think he lived in California. So, but yes, we went through 14 or 15, all through the whole Gilberts and Marshalls and Keevings, and the last one I was with was the little island of Peleliu that we bombarded, which is in preparation to landing on the Philippines.
How describe a bombardment by Tennessee?
Well, we just you have the little island sitting out there all by itself, and we would just go by and just sail by it with our the big guns all pointed in the same direction. They never fired simultaneously, but they would alternate it.
How are those guns fed?
By well, the big heavy lead part of it is put in there by a winch.
Okay.
They had winches on tracks that would carry it from the one storage place over the gun, and jam it in. But then the powder was handled by hand. And then the chief gunner's mate is the one that would slam in the door, shut and seal it, and then they fired from the top side.
And how many rounds a minute could they fire?
Oh, they could pour them out. Oh God, I don't know. In a minute, I guess maybe 5 or 6. Oh,
And
they
those,
could. Huh?
Those 14 to 16 inch rounds.
14.
14.
Yeah, I remember we was up there in oh, can't remember the name of the little island, Kwajalein. And before we took it, we went in and bombarded it. We went in the bay, and we went in with depressed guns. They was down as low as they could. There's an angle of about like that. Normally they normally try to get just for the period of whatever they're going to fire, and they just fire into the old palm trees and everything, and just blast it. And but normally you would on a battleship you would never fire forward and aft simultaneously.
Why?
You break your ship in two. You have your concussion to pull it this way. So
And you said that you left the Tennessee?
in May of 1943,
Wow.
went to LST 278.
Why were you taking off to Tennessee?
They needed somebody for independent duty.
And what's independent?
Independent duty is a medical representative without a doctorate board. In other words, I was the only medical representative aboard the ship at that time. It was a landing craft.
So that's where the front opens up?
Yeah.
LST?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd have a complement of, I'd say 40, 50 people. Various ratings, you know. But
And where did you go on the LST? What happened?
I know we was in on Guam and Kinyan, Saipan. And I always think it's the island of Peleliu that we went in, and there was a hurricane came along, and our captain was hesitant to get his ship off the beach. You want to get out in the water when them things come, because you can toss in the water. But he was hesitant in doing it. All the rest of them did, but he waited too long. And then when they did finally order him out of there. The storm really hit. It caught us crosswise in the waves. They come in, didn't beat us. We was backing out. Then the waves would catch us. I mean, they were waves, and they turned us sideways, and then just pushed us over all that coral, just tore the bottom out of that thing. So from there we couldn't go anyplace. So they finally got it patched up enough that we could put us in a floating dry dock, and we got in there. Just barely got in there, and they had, in order that there was going to be an air raid coming up at 12 o'clock. All ships get out of there. And here we sat in that old dry dock, high and dry. You see all the ships sailing away from you over the horizon, and there you sat. 12 o'clock, here he comes. He dropped one bomb, but he missed it. Oh God, he missed it. I think he was scared to get very close to him because there was aircraft on batteries on the floating dry docks, and he dropped it. In the end, of course, he missed us, and that's the last we saw of him.
This is the Japanese.
Yeah, yeah. So we got the bottom patched up, and then we went up to Guam, and stayed up there for a little while. Then I got transferred off to an LCI. That was during Iwo Jima, and I had to relieve a hospital corpsman up there. I was on an LCI, and that's of course independent duty again. And we didn't hang around there because other than after the first 2 or 3 days, there wasn't that much to do for the board ship medical department, because the Marines and Army had all their own medical staff over there on the beach by then. But I think we got there maybe the second day. But we had to fly up in a oh shoot, I don't remember what the old plane was. It was a rickety old thing. I didn't think it was even ever going to make it. An old cargo plane. There's no seats, nothing, and you just go in the back and sit on the floor and take off. They did give us a life jacket, but we made it up there, and the boy was relieved, but he got the Navy Cross for his work up there in Iwo Jima. But those Marines and soldiers, both they took a beating up there.
Were you involved in anything like that, like invasions of Guadalcanal or Iwo Jima and that area?
Oh yeah, we escorted them in there. Saipan, yeah, in those landings. Oh yeah.
What? Describe those landings. What are they like?
Well, the big ships go in and bombard, and the aircraft carriers will send their bombers in, and they'll lay down bombs galore. And they'll just lay a pattern. They'll just level everything in their paths that might be anywhere near where the boys are going to land. And then you'll have all your ship troop carriers, and they'll have all of the boys in it, and they'll hit that beach. They'll go in there by waves, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, depending on how many there are. As soon as they get in and land a beachhead, then we come in with the LSTs and unloaded, load the tanks and all other kind of vehicles, and with supplies and so forth. But then you unload, then you're empty again.
Did you make a landing?
I never did go in on a landing. No. No, my place was aboard ship. I had to stay there.
Now the first wave, they're the ones that really get hit hard.
The second and third waves are the ones that get hit hard. It was their idea that to let that first wave go and get the second and third, because they figure, well, we get the second and third, but they can't reinforce the first, and then we'll go down and wipe out the first, and then that way we'll have all three waves. So a lot of those boys took that first wave, knowing they had an awful lot of support right behind them.
Yeah.
Let me run to the bathroom.
Sure. Shipper, when he heard that first torpedo, he knew what it was, and he said he was the last man to come off the ship.
Yeah.
Well, let me see. We're talking about the invasions, the landings,
Yeah.
the LSTs and LCOs.
Well, while I was still on the Tennessee,
Yep.
we made that the trip up to Kiska in Alaska, and we sailed for 89 days in a circle. The 3 battleships that was up there. It was so round and round. It was so foggy you couldn't see nothing. You couldn't see nothing. Absolutely nothing, other than they have their well, at that time we had some radar. At that time, so we knew where the other ships were. But for 3 months we sailed, over 89 days we sailed, and on the 90th day the sun came out. They had it predicted, the weathermen knew that it was going to break in them. And of course the Japs were gone. They took off. They knew,
That's when they were the Aleutian Islands?
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah. So we'd went in and bombarded it though. Oh yeah, we laid down a tremendous barrage. But
when was that?
in 1943.
1943.
First part of 43.
How'd the Japanese get out?
Oh, I'm sure they had their own ships to take them out. I don't think there was that many. They said, as I remember, it seems to me they said they only had 200 or 300 on that island. But why they had any, I don't know. There's nothing up there. Just some fishermen is always good for.
As I understand, they're going to come up the islands up to Alaska and then down that way.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. They had grandiose plans, but didn't know what they were getting into.
Besides Pearl Harbor, what's the largest battle you were in?
Oh, probably Tarawa.
Tell me about that.
Well, Tarawa, that's the one that I was still aboard the Tennessee at that time, and we bombarded that thing for 3 days, day and night. Planes every day, they were over it, but the ships just kept up a periodic barrage all night long. You know, maybe fire one every 5 minutes or something like that, and they were still entrenched down in the ground, underground. Just like rats, they were down underneath till the boys landed, and then they came out. And here they were, and where they landed, there was kind of a little cove-like affair. See, while they were on both sides, and they had them in a crossfire. That's why we lost so many of the men. And they delayed the landing too long. Whoever was in command at that time, he didn't let them go in. He thought the tide was too low. And he wanted a higher tide to get in on it. See, well, that was a mistake he made. He should have went in on the lower ones. But we did bombard it continuously. It's just amazing how they could even be alive without being so stunned, so numb from that continuous bombardment. Because there wasn't a palm tree on that island that wasn't damaged. Just a little old thing, but you could see across it. But then during the landing operations, towards the evening of that first day, one of the boys aboard ship spotted a submarine. The submarine would not answer any radio calls or anything whatsoever. And it was a Jap sub was sitting in there. And they immediately set all their automated gear. By that thing, you see, everything was automated by radar. Radar would direct and everything, so all they'd have to do is press the button. And they just poured a bunch of 5-inch shells into it. And somehow or other, it came completely to the surface. I mean, they really surfaced, and some of the Japs came aboard, and one of our little boats picked up 3 of them.
So you picked up several Japanese.
Yeah, and questioned them. And then, of course, turned over to military intelligence. Yeah, just little old scrawny that looked like they'd been starved to death. They probably didn't have that much to eat anyway. Because usually a healthy Japanese, or at least all those I saw in Hawaii, they were, you couldn't count the ribs anyway. but you could on these boys. But they were so fanatical to their emperor that they'd just do anything.
Were you there at truck?
No, no, that was hit by a one of your carrier task force, and we battleships weren't in carrier task force. Just your they had heavy cruisers and light cruisers and destroyers escorting them that had speeds. They say that we could go 21 knots, but I don't think so. Our traveling speed was probably 14 knots, which is about 20 miles an hour. But no, we were battleships were too slow for that.
Where were you when they dropped the bomb?
Oh, I was in Baltimore. So I went from Iwo Jima, and after I got relieved from that that little ship, they sent me back to Guam. I waited about a month and then caught a transport back to the United States, and they sent me to Baltimore, Maryland, Naval Dispensary in Baltimore, Maryland, and that's where I finished out from, I guess the spring till August of.
Was it publicized when they dropped the bomb?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
What do you think about it?
I don't know. I always looked at it as a blessing. I was looking at it. Look at the boys that goes in on those landings. I'd seen those landings, and you know how many of them don't come back out. And it did. It saved hundreds of thousands of our boys. Of course, the effects you didn't realize at that time. We didn't know the effects of it. The general public, none of the general public did. We didn't. We didn't realize what an atomic bomb really was. But not like we do now. But it made them surrender in a hurry. And yeah, we was over in Baltimore for the on D-Day in June of 44. No, I wasn't over there in June of 44. I didn't get back till 45. I was just back for 45.
Were you there for VE Day?
Yeah.
Is there a big celebration there in Baltimore?
Oh
VE
yeah,
Day?
every town in the country had a big celebration.
Tell me about that, though. What'd you do?
Oh, I think my wife and I stayed home because the streets were so full of people that they were just madhouse. So we just kind of stayed in where we were and let them fight it out.
What about BJ Day?
That too. We just
what was your job there in Baltimore?
Oh, there wasn't a whole lot to do in a naval dispensary in downtown Baltimore. Just if any of the boys on leave got sick or anything, you just served the area. Because golly, Annapolis was just, Washington D.C. was just up the road, so there wasn't that much to do.
Why were you sent to Baltimore?
I don't know. I don't know why they sent me over there. Maybe I figured I'd been there out there long enough for too long. Cause I was out there since the very beginning. And
so when did you get your discharge?
November 11th, 1986, 46.
Yeah. And what'd you do there?
Well, then I went to school. I enrolled up there at the University of Minnesota in January of 46. And
how long did you stay in Minnesota then?
oh, we stayed there till 50. We came down here in 52.
Why'd you move to Oklahoma?
Oh, wife's folks lived here. And her father was pretty ill, and I really didn't have a whole lot of concrete work to do. Thought I did, but it turned out I didn't. But so we just moved down here and see what Oklahoma had to offer, and so we've been here ever since. So.
And you have an appraisal business now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I worked with the highway department for about 16 years. And then I opened my own office down here in '72. Been here ever since.
Yeah. What's your wife's name?
Claudia.
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 What's her maiden?
Polk, Polk.
And where'd you meet her?
San Francisco, no, Seattle.
Seattle.
Seattle, back there in '42.
And she was from Oklahoma?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is she working out there?
Yeah. How she got up there, I don't know. She didn't either. Of all places.
Was she doing war work out there? Or?
No, not really. No. No, she was. She was doing secretarial work, and then she would working as a sales lady, a clerk. And then when the children came along, why, she didn't work at all.
Of course, I suppose you reflect back on Pearl Harbor in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Did you help any of the other ships, the wounded or dead on the other ships, during the battle?
Not during the battle, no, because we had our own burn cases to take care of. So no, we didn't get to help. But there is some of the boys from West Virginia came over to help us because there's nothing they could do. They were underwater. Yeah. No, because you couldn't. You didn't have any transportation to get from one to the other. And it seems to me it was what, on Tuesday or Wednesday? Yes, 2-3 days after Pearl Harbor. They wanted volunteers to do a very gruesome task, and that's to go out and pick up all the arms, legs, torsos, wherever you find dead, washed up on the beach around the islands. So that's one job that we had. The three of us went in a little pogey boat, you know. Yeah. And yeah, we had, I forget how many we had. We just, all we'd do is take them over to the hospital, see if they could identify them with anything. Because when you have those explosions, why they just tear everything up. The human body, in a sense, is very frail when you have something like that.
Well,
but yeah, I enjoyed my tour of duty, my 6 years in the Navy, active duty. Then I went back to reserves in 1956, Naval Reserves. I stayed there till '72. So I wound up with 29 years and 11 months. I told the guys, why couldn't you wait at least another month or dug up let me get enough points to make an even 30 years.
Well, I think we had a good interview. Anything else in particular about Pearl Harbor that you recall?
No, other than we in the evening when it got dark, we took all our boys that were burned over to the Naval Hospital. We transferred them all over there. And in the period of time it takes to go across the bay, I showed you, from Fort Island over to the hospital. They sound general quarters and air raid siren and everything else they could show up. And these searchlights picked out a little plane way up there. He wouldn't identify himself. They knew there was some supposed to be coming in from the west coast that had left, and they wouldn't identify themselves on the first call. And of course our gunners didn't wait, so they laid down a barrage over him, and he hurriedly identified himself real fast because they had the light on him and they had their guns all. Well, you could see the tracers going up.
Yeah. I understand there were some planes that landed.
Oh yeah.
During the battle, the end of the battle.
Well, yeah, at the end of the battle, really, because there was supposed to have been, as I heard, one of the aircraft carriers was bringing back three loads, really, two in the air and one on the ship, continuously. Just a round robin as you go, as they went all the way across, and that's when they came in on. I think it was on a Monday or Tuesday they got
And then we shot some of those planes in.
there.
That's what I heard.
They could have. If they didn't identify themselves. Now, 2 weeks before Pearl Harbor, when we was out on our last maneuvers, we had a submarine